Hi, I'm Jay Thomas, and welcome to Bald Tires, a proud member of the Saskatchewan Podcast Network. Today, my guest is the owner of Rollin Steel, a really cool business on Avenue C in Saskatoon that specializes in building and fixing wheels and, of course, supplying tires. Darren LaBonte joins me, and we're going to talk today about a couple of vehicles that Darren has owned twice, and the story of so many cool GM vehicles in Darren's life that have been a part of his life so far. In part 2 of the podcast that we're going to release next week, it's called Go Out and Buy an Old Car. In part 2, we're going to talk about why it's so cool to drive an old car these days. Right now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the fun stories Darren's got for us. You're listening to Bald Tires, because when you make great memories, you make bald tires. The Saskatchewan Podcast Network is supported by Connexus. Does money spark joy in your life or cause you stress? If you said stress, you're not alone. For 42% of Canadians, their biggest stressor comes from money. At Connexus, they care about your financial well-being. Money doesn't have to be stressful, and Connexus is here to help. The Connexus #MoneyTalk blog provides expert advice, tips, and solutions for all stages of life and events. Getting married, buying a house, budgeting, saving, they cover it all and more. And did I mention it's free? Check it out today at connexusmoneytalk.ca and start feeling confident and stress-free about your money. The Saskatchewan Podcast Network is also supported by Direct West. Is marketing getting in the way of running your business? Things like updating your Google listing, thinking of a headline for your billboard, or making sure your website is in good shape? That's where Direct West comes in. You can get local expert marketing help for your business at directwest.com. All right, well, I find myself in a pretty cool place over on Avenue C in Saskatoon, and it's called Rollin Steel. And I got Darren here with me, who's the owner, but he's also a supercar guy. Darren, thanks for coming on the podcast with me.
Well, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so let's start with this. Rollin Steel is a shop. We'll talk about this first. Rollin Steel is a shop that fixes wheels, custom makes wheels. You kind of do it all, right?
Yeah, and pretty much anything wheel and tire related. Been doing it for a long time and very passionate about it, and just thought, hey, let's try to make money doing it. So
So how long has Rollin Steel been around?
Rollin Steel was open for 3 years. August 1st was our 3-year anniversary.
Awesome.
I've been in the wheel and tire business for just about 15.
Yep.
And before that, I was in the auto body trade, so I've been around cars pretty much since the start. So.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
You guys had I've seen where you paint a wheel, change color, but it gets really in depth what you guys can do with the machinery that's in this shop, just kind of sitting around us, where you can somebody likes a certain size, but they like that wheel. You can enlarge the wheel, so to speak, make it wider. We can change the rim size of it. Keep the center, change out the outside, vice versa. Like, it's sort of anything and everything. Yeah,
in lots of cases we can do stuff like that. Lots of times guys need the upsize for tire choice, or maybe to clear some brakes, or
right.
There's lots of different reasons why guys do it. Some guys just really like a factory wheel with a really old factory hubcap, but they can't buy tires to fit it. So that's what we do. We take it maybe from a 14-inch to a 15-inch.
Yep.
Tires are more readily available. Stuff like that.
That's cool.
So yeah,
and you can supply all the tires too.
Yeah, exactly. And we really like doing that kind of work, because to me that's the most fun out of pretty much anything we do, is when we get to build something from nothing, or modify something and make it work for a person. So. And
then another big thing you guys do, obviously, is somebody's doing a parallel park and curves the wheel, and it looks like hell, and now you can fix it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, we do lots of that. I mean, we've done it on people who have cars that are 20 years old, and we did it for a guy just a couple weeks ago. His car was about a day old.
Oh no.
So yeah, I've done it even for people in the past that literally scratched their wheels pulling out of the dealership parking lot. So and they're always very distraught when they come, and you just try to give them the peace of mind that it'll be like new and it's done, and they're usually pretty good. But.
And it is. Like, you can make a rusty old wheel, or an aluminum wheel that's got all that oxidization going on. It looks like hell. You can bring it right back to life.
Yeah, you bet.
Pretty cool. Yeah. Now, we're in Saskatchewan, but where did you grow up?
I was born in a small town in British Columbia on Vancouver Island called Port Alberni.
Cool.
So yeah,
that's kind of northern part of the island a little bit.
It's actually, if you look at it on a map, it's darn near exactly in the middle of the island, in all directions.
Except I guess when you think of going to the island, like, because everybody starts out kind of going to Victoria,
Yeah.
it's north of that, right?
It is north of that. Yeah. And it's, lots of people go to the island and they never see where I grew up because it's not on a main. You have to kind of go a little bit off the beaten path to get there. So, yeah, a lot of people don't know where it is.
So were you still living in Port Alberni when you got your driver's license?
Yes, I was.
Yeah?
I lived there till I was 18 and a half, I think.
So when do you think you kind of got into cars? Were you a little kid? Were you a little older?
I was always big into, I liked Transformers when I was a kid because they were cars.
Yeah.
And I liked Hot Wheels and all that kind of thing. So when I was a little kid, yeah, sure. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Like lots of kids did. But for me, the first time a car really caught my attention, I was probably 12 or 13, and my uncle, who is not here anymore, but he was a huge car guy as well, he pulled into my grandparents' driveway in a 1978 gold Trans Am with a 4-speed.
Cool.
And took me for a ride.
Yeah.
And I was pretty much hooked after that. And then it didn't make it any better because it wasn't very long after that. He traded that for a 78 Corvette, which I actually own now.
You've got that Corvette?
I got it when he passed away. It was something that I ended up getting. So then he took me for a ride in that car. And, well, Corvettes, I've never been a big Corvette guy. But a Corvette is a Corvette.
Yeah.
And there's no other really car like a Corvette.
No.
Corvettes are just a Corvette. So when he took me for a ride in it, this was like this amazing thing. And when I was 16, I got to drive it one time. And I didn't wreck it or anything, but I got to drive it one time. And I knew I was going to be cars for...
That was it.
For my life, probably.
That was, you were in.
Yeah, for sure.
What did you take for your driver license, your driver exam?
When I went for my road test, my dad had a 1969 Chevy C10 long box truck. It was an inline 6 automatic. It had no power steering, no power brakes. I think the guy passed me when I tried to do the parallel parking. I think he passed me just because I was able to do it, period. It didn't matter that I was going to hit the curb, and it didn't matter anything else. He was just so impressed that I was able to turn the stupid thing with no power steering and drive it with no power brakes.
That's hilarious.
But, yeah, it was a funny truck, that
This
one.
is into the 90s, I'm guessing?
It would have been about 1994.
Like, that's already an old truck.
Oh, it was an old truck, yeah, for
right?
sure.
I mean, it's old. It's really old now. Obviously,
he
it's
laughed.
50 years old, but...
The instructor laughed when he came out to take me for my road test. Because we were walking, and it was parked in the row, and there was a much newer little Honda, I think, if I remember correctly, parked kind of the next spot closer. And we're walking, and as we're walking, he kind of veered like he was going to get into the passenger seat of the Honda. And I kind of went, no, it's the truck. And he just kind of went, right? Well, because he was like, really? And I said, yeah. So, of course, then he made me do a check of everything to make sure everything worked.
Uh-huh.
And I'm pretty sure the horn worked before that day, but it didn't work. And technically, he shouldn't have let me take the road test in it with no working horn.
Sure.
But he did.
He did.
He was good about it. But yeah, we only drove for about 10 minutes. And then he just told me, okay, now just back up in a straight line and parallel park and you're good. So I did.
That's
And
it.
Yeah, it was all good.
So what was the first car?
First car, actually, ironically enough, was a 1970 GMC half-ton truck. So almost exactly the same truck.
Yep.
$400, rust holes in it everywhere. You could have dropped. I did actually lose a bottle jack through one of them.
It went right through.
Right through the floor. Yeah, I didn't even know it was missing probably for weeks until I had to change a tire and went to look behind the seat, and it wasn't where it was sitting, and there was a big hole there. So I hope nobody hit it on the road. I always feel bad about it when I think about it, but I didn't hear it fall out.
So this is the truck you had. Like, how long did it last, this truck?
I had that truck. Well, funny, because I bought it. It was $400, and I bought it, and I didn't even get to drive it home because tranny didn't work. I didn't test drive it or anything, but I just liked it, so I bought it. I didn't even get to drive it home. Had to get it towed home. Got another transmission. I drove that truck for, I don't know, 6 months probably.
And like, you're 16, and you were already a guy who was like putting a transmission into a truck.
Yeah, well, yeah. Like, my dad was pretty mechanically inclined when I was younger, and he usually, I mean, my family never had lots of money growing up.
Yep.
My dad had to fix stuff.
Yep.
That's just how it was. Couldn't
My
afford to
family
go to
too.
a mechanic.
Yeah.
So, he learned. And so, he laid underneath the truck with me and showed me where the bolts go and showed me how to do it. And, that was the first transmission I ever did, but it certainly wasn't the last.
Yeah.
But yeah, I only had it for 6 months. And then I was like, got this brainiac idea. Somebody wanted my truck for reasons I still don't understand and traded me a 1980 Firebird for it.
A Firebird.
A Firebird, yeah. As plain Jane as you could get a Firebird.
So you're 16 and 6 months and you got a Firebird.
Yeah. Oh, I thought I was a pretty important
hot
person.
Shit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was hot. It was about as plain Jane a Firebird as you could get.
Like a 6-cylinder Firebird?
No, it was still V8, but at the smallest V8 you could get. It was an 80, so it had I always called it the Darth Vader front end on it.
Oh yeah.
It was one of the ugliest front ends on them. Automatic, small V8, wood grain dash, no gauges, just a couple dummy lights. Like, it was a very plain Jane. It actually didn't even have a spoiler from factory.
Oh,
it was
really?
a non-spoiler car that someone had put a spoiler on. But it was, the paint was really nice on it, and that was the only reason why I traded, because my other truck was rusty. So, and yeah, I only had that for 6 months, and then I think the motor went in it or something. But
so have you had a ton of cars?
Oh,
You're
my
one of those
goodness.
people that had a ton of
I'm
cars?
one of those people that I couldn't count on all my fingers and toes how many cars I've had, and that's just the classic cars. That's not even counting all the daily driver stuff that I've owned. I've had tons of cars, and not to be biased, but just about everything's been GM. I've always just been a GM. I'm convinced that I'm a GM guy because my grandpa and my dad were GM guys. If they'd been Ford guys, I'd be a Ford guy. I think that's how it works. I really do.
I believe
it's
that.
It's not very often that you'll find someone that, like, their dad had Fords his whole life, but he's a Chevy guy through and through. So that doesn't happen often.
You know what I think it is? I think it's that we grow up respecting these people in our lives. They're people we look up to, our dads, our parents in general, of course our moms too, but so we value the decision that they made.
For sure.
So if they think that's a good vehicle or they're a fan of that brand, we respect them and we respect their choices, and I think that's why we inherit that. Yeah, sort of in that way.
For sure. I believe that too, for sure. It's funny because my grandpa, being a Chevy guy, he never bought anything new. One of the first things he ever had brand new, was his 1980 4x4 truck, which I now have.
Yeah, I've seen that one. It's cool. Yeah.
But it's so funny because when I finally was going to get the truck, because it went to my uncle who passed away, but I finally got the truck a few years before my uncle passed away. When I went home to get it, I had to trailer it back to Saskatchewan because it really wasn't in a condition to be driving it that far.
Yeah.
I remember loading it up on the trailer, and then we went to my grandparents' house for dinner the night before we were leaving to come home back to Saskatchewan. And my grandpa's looking out the window with me, and he goes, I don't even know why you even like that thing. It wasn't even a good truck. He'd always had motor issues with it and other little stupid things with it. But I said to him, Grandpa, it's not about what the truck is. It could have been a Dodge or a Ford. It wouldn't have mattered. I said, it's the memories that I have in the truck that make it special to me.
Totally it.
So, yeah, me and him going hunting and fishing and, just going even on a Sunday to the market to go do whatever when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And it's got a really squeaky clutch pedal, and it makes the same sound every time you push the clutch in. I think it's pretty inherent on those trucks. But every time I drive that truck and I hear that squeak, it takes me back to going somewhere with Grandpa doing something.
Totally.
And, he drove that truck everywhere. That truck's been to Alaska a handful of times.
Cool.
It's been all over. The odometer's gone around. I don't even know how many times. But, and it's hardly perfect, but it's Grandpa's truck, and it always will be. And, it's one of those things. And
that's the same reason, that I've my big old Buick, and Buicks is what my grandpa had, and so it was almost kind of a tribute in a way. He'd already passed away when I bought it, and it's certainly not the car he owned.
Yeah.
But it's kind of would have been a car he could have owned, and that's sort of why I kind of enjoy it that way.
Yeah. For
so
sure.
I totally get why why you're a GM guy.
And it's just how it is. And I like working on them because so much stuff's interchangeable for so many years. It's so easy. Like, I don't even know how many times I've been like, oh man, I need this stupid little bracket, and I'm working on a 1960 something.
Yeah.
But I owned 3 1980 somethings, and oh, wait a minute, that bracket is exactly the same except for this one little part that I can cut off. I'm gonna cut it off and repaint it, and oh, look at that, I have the bracket I need. And
What you're kind of saying is they built the same car for like 40 years.
I wouldn't say that, but you know,
I know.
they definitely so much stuff interchanged.
Yeah.
And, and I always love that about it. And you know, to be quite honest, if you're gonna build an old car, a Chevy or GM car is probably one of the cheapest cars you'll build.
Well, and there's probably a reason too that, you know, the Chev 350 is just what goes into a hot rod.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
They're plentiful. Their parts are interchangeable.
Yeah.
There's a billion of them out there. You can still get the crate engine. It was in everything for so long.
Well,
you know,
there's a reason why. I don't know. Am I exaggerating a little bit to say that 50% of Ford hot rods got Chevy small blocks in them?
well, I don't know what
There's
the
a
number is,
reason
but
for it.
you're not wrong, right? It happens lots.
Yeah,
you know.
there's a reason for it, and it's only in recent years that you've started to see a lot more stuff come out with Ford power plants, like guys building stuff with Ford power plants, because Ford, I think, finally the aftermarket has been stepping up now with other manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can build a Chevy small block engine for pennies in comparison to a lot of these other engines. Like I even have Oldsmobiles and Pontiacs, and you can't build an Oldsmobile and a Pontiac engine for what you can build a small block Chevy engine for. You just can't even come close.
That's right. Yeah.
So I mean, it totally makes sense why it's like that, for sure.
Totally. So, a whole slew of cars. And so what's the story in between sort of 16 and when you moved? You left BC when?
I left BC when I was, what year was that? 2000? The
2000.
Fall of 2000. So
Okay,
I would have been like 19, 20.
Something like that?
Yeah. I got a brainiac idea in my head that, I'm going to go to Alberta and make money like everyone else does.
Okay,
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, it didn't work out that way. But I did learn some stuff.
What were you going to do in Alberta?
Well, my plan was initially, so I was pumping gas at a gas station, and so I had 3 part-time jobs in BC.
Yep.
Thinking to myself, this is stupid. Yeah, I've got some money in the bank, but I have no time to do anything with it. So I, at the time, had a 1969 Oldsmobile Cutlass, which I still own.
Yeah.
And my buddy that I'd gone to school with had, right after high school, had moved to Alberta to live with his dad. And he kept hounding me. Just get your stuff and come out. There's so much work. Okay. So I loaded everything I owned into my Cutlass, which wasn't very much.
Cutlass isn't a big car.
No,
so.
not a huge car. I did fill the trunk, but that was about it.
Yeah.
And put winter tires on the car because it was going in November, and I thought to myself, I'm going to be smart and put winter tires in the car.
Yeah.
Didn't think about putting a carpet in the car for the bare steel floor or anything. Didn't think about any of that kind of thing, but I thought I'm going to put tires on so I won't get stuck. Drove to Alberta, and I immediately regretted not having a carpet in the car by the time December rolled around.
Well, I was going to say, so you drove it like, yeah, okay, we'll get to that in a second, but yeah. So you moved to Alberta.
Yeah, moved to Alberta and couldn't find a job. Nobody wanted to hire me because I didn't know anything. I was young. I didn't know anything. I knew how to pump gas. So I ended up getting a job pumping gas and driving really way too far to work and not making any money because I was spending it all driving to work. So yeah, so that lasted about 6 weeks. And I was like, said to my buddy, I said, you know what, man, I'm just going to go home. I said, this is dumb. I'm not making any money here. I can probably get my old job back and at least I'd have an income.
Yeah.
And so he said, oh, don't do that, man. I'll help you out. So he went and talked to his dad who worked at this hot rod shop in Alberta, just outside Edmonton. And his dad talked to the boss, and the boss phoned me and told me to come for an interview. So I did, and he hired me.
Cool.
And it was $10 an hour, I think, at the time, which was better than the minimum wage.
Yep.
And so I started out, and I was started out by just sandblasting stuff for the hot rod shop. That was where I started.
So you were kind of helping with body work.
Yeah, just sandblasting. Like sometimes they need a frame sandblasted
Right.
or whatever.
It's in pieces, yeah.
You know, I learned how to do. I do stainless repair and polishing and stuff like
cool.
that.
Yeah.
And that's where I learned how to do it. So I spent a bunch of weeks. I don't remember, 6 weeks or something like that, doing all the stainless on a 59 Cadillac limousine. There's a lot of stainless on a car that size.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was a lot of work, but I learned lots, and I learned how to do other stuff. And actually, my Oldsmobile that I still have today, I painted there.
While you were at that shop.
Yeah, it was the first car I'd ever painted in a real paint booth. So that wasn't spray bombs. It was pretty cool.
I've done lots of those.
Yeah. So I learned some stuff.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you had your olds at that point, right?
Yeah.
You're working at the shop. How do you get to Saskatchewan?
Stupidity is the word that comes to mind most of the time. but I love my son to death. But I met his mom. She was visiting somebody that she knew in the same town that I was living in, which is Spruce Grove, Alberta. Well, she turns out that the friend that she came with knew the people I was rooming and boarding at. Like, it was a total fluke.
Yeah.
And so we kind of hung out that first weekend she was there, and then it just snowballed from there.
Cool.
And when it didn't make sense for her to move there and then us have no family support when she was pregnant or anything. So we just I made the decision, well, I guess I'm moving to Saskatchewan. My mom was pissed. She was already mad I went to Alberta, but now I'm going another province away. But yeah, so, and to boot, now she's going to have a grandson. She's have to spend a bunch of money to go see. But yeah, so I moved here, and that was 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Yeah. So you had the olds from then.
Yeah.
Is there any other cars that you had then that you still have now? I mean, we're talking about the truck that came from Grandpa, right?
Well, the stupid part is that I sold the Oldsmobile about 2 years after I moved here.
Okay.
So I don't even know if it was 2 full years. Actually, it might not have been. It might have been only about a year and a half.
So what you're saying is, like, had your son and
I had
car seat's got to go somewhere.
I had
kind
a
of thing?
son, and so the first thing, car seat doesn't fit in the back of a 1969 Oldsmobile if it's a 2-door. The rear-facing car seat does not fit in one of those facing the rear. So he always had to. It was a bench seat car at least, so he always rode in the middle in the front. Well, that's not exactly the safest place for a baby either, especially in an old car. So I ended up trading the car for a pickup truck.
Okay.
So then it was a short box Chevy truck, an 80s short box Chevy truck. So I traded the car for that and drove that truck for, I don't know, a year, 2 years or something like that. And then I ended up trading and then I traded that truck for a 67 Chevy truck, an older truck, which I liked way more. And then I realized that after I did it, the 80s truck had a really good heater and I could actually drive that thing all year round. And the 67 truck has a crappy heater, crappy tires, crappy suspension because it was lowered. This isn't going to be the truck I want to drive around the winter. So I ended up buying a daily driver for cheap.
Yeah.
And and I've pretty much had 2 vehicles ever since. At least 2 vehicles ever since. But that's where it started sort of getting out of control, I want to say. Yeah.
How many cars do you own right now?
Right now I have, if I include everything that I own that has wheels, I have, I have to think about like 5.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 5.
5.
Yeah.
So there's the Olds.
The Oldsmobile.
There's the Pontiac.
Yeah, my 71 Firebird.
Yeah.
I've got my 80 4x4 truck that was Grandpa's.
Yeah.
The 78 Vet that was
Your uncle's.
my uncle's. And my 2018 Chevy truck. That's my 5.
That's your 5 there.
So, yeah.
Okay, so what's the rest of the story with the Olds? Because you got rid of it
So I sold it.
to get this series of trucks.
Yeah,
and kind of move into
so,
some boring daily vehicles.
Yeah, well, and I had this 67 truck, and then I sold that, and I had a 67 Beaumont, and then I sold that, and I had a 53 truck, and then I sold that, and had a 71 Le Mans, and then I sold that, and had a 65 Beaumont, and then I sold that, and had a 70 GTO, and then it just goes on and on and on. So the Cutlass I sold, and it ended up going to a guy, or I traded it for this truck, and that guy ended up pulling some bits and pieces off of it. He just basically wanted it for the wheels for his 69 Oldsmobile.
Okay.
So he put the wheels that were on it onto his car, and then he sold the car, and he sold it to this young kid who only drove it for like 6 months or something like that, and then he wrecked the motor in it. So then it sat in his mom's garage for 8 years. So, but it turned out that I worked with the guy that bought the car. I worked with his buddy. So I found out where the car was.
So you worked with his buddy, and you just happened to talk about sitting.
I showed him a picture of the car one day, and he's like, "That's my buddy's car." And I'm like, "Well, who's your buddy?" And he's like, "Oh, my buddy Dan's got this car, and it's a color. It's that color."
Because it's a kind of a specific color combination.
Yeah, it is.
Right? It's silver.
It's 2000 Ferrari silver, and then it has House of Colors blue candy on it. So
it's not like it's original colors that it could just be one of every. Like there's 30,000 burgundy ones out there or something like that.
Yeah, it's
you
kind
painted
of
it sort of specifically.
Yeah, and it's a one-off kind of car. It doesn't look like any other 69 Cutlass when you go to a car show.
So this guy you're working with goes, I know that car.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So then his buddy happens to come in one day, and I'm like, you're down? He says, yeah. He says, you want to sell your car? Because I knew that it wasn't running, and it was been sitting in this garage for a couple of years already by that time. No, I got big plans for the car. Okay, but if you ever want to sell it, let me know. And every time I would buy and sell one of my classic cars, when I had all the money in my hand, the first thing I would always do is be like, Dan, you want to sell your car? No, big plans. Okay. And I'd go buy something else.
Yeah.
And then when I'd sell it, a year and a half later, hey, Dan, you want to sell your car? No, big plans. And then finally, right after I sold my Fire, because the Trans Am or the Firebird, the 71, I've owned twice as well. So right after I sold that, I had a little bit of money, and Dan comes to me one day and he says, okay, my mom sold her house and I'm not going to have the storage for it anymore. Mm-hmm. And I don't want it to sit outside at my house. So he says, bring me what I paid for it when I bought it and come and get it.
Really?
I didn't even hesitate for a second. I asked him how much. I got the money, and I went like within hours. I didn't give him any chance to change his mind.
Yep.
I went within hours. I went with a buddy. We went and we towed it out of his garage and away. Gone. As fast as I could.
With a blown motor.
It had a blown motor, and he'd pulled that motor out and put a 455 Oldsmobile engine in it, but it had never ran. It just was sitting in there.
So was it a 455 car when it was new?
No. It was a 350 car.
350 car.
Yeah.
Okay. So minus the wheels that should have been on it.
Yeah.
And a bigger engine in it.
Yeah.
Which is okay.
Yeah. Would have been. If it was a good motor. It wasn't a very good motor. It ran, but it wasn't a very good motor. Okay. The motor that he blew up was an awesome motor. It had been rebuilt before I bought the car. Oh. So it was disappointing. But yeah.
So you get this thing back.
Yeah.
I mean, it's on the road now, so like...
Well, I get it back, and it's like... The interior wasn't super great when I sold it. It needed to be redone. So now it's got 8 years of sitting in some guy's garage. So it smells like it's been sitting in a garage. And it's dirty, and the car's been a shelf for 8 years. So it's got new scratch. Like, as I had painted it when I lived in Alberta. So the paint was pretty nice when I sold it, but now the paint's all scratched, and it's got little dings here and there on the trim and stuff that it never had before. And so it was a little rough around the edges. But it only took me about 45 minutes, and I had it running. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, so I actually drove it that same day. So
you should have drove it back to his house and just waved, hey? Like
I thought about it, but then I thought, I'm not going to be a jerk about it. But
wow.
And then I've had it since. So, and that was like 2000 and that would have been about 2009.
You put some carpet into it?
I bought a full interior out of a parts car from a guy in Calgary.
No
it
way.
Was seats, door panels, and it had all been redone in the 90s. So it was all that real fancy tweed that they were using big in the 90s.
Yeah.
It was ugly as sin. It's still in the car now. It's ugly as sin, but it wasn't all torn up. Yep. So it was still better than what I had, so I just put it in it. So yeah, it has a carpet.
It's got a carpet.
But I don't drive it in the winter anymore.
That's funny. And this car, like, I know you kind of got some projects on the go. We'll get into that in a second. But this car, it's sort of slated to be kind of redone and rebuilt.
It will be. Eventually. I brought my son home from the hospital in that car. I have a picture of me standing next to the car with him in the baby carrier the day he came home from the hospital. So it has a little bit of, I didn't want to sell it way back in the day. I was very disappointed. It was not something I wanted to do. Yeah. And now that it's back, the plan was eventually to give it to him at some point in his life when he's ready.
Yep.
He's a 19-year-old kid. I don't know if he'll ever be ready, but that was the kind of the plan. But it'll
come around.
I'm gonna keep it for forever and it will be restored. It needs to be restored now. It's been another 20 years since it was painted.
Sure. Yeah.
So it needs to be restored. So that's the plan anyway.
But now you're in a spot where you can do those kind of things, which is cool.
Hope, yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. I mean, and it's got so much history with you. It came from BC with you, and it's come back to you. That's a cool story.
Yeah, no.
There's also a cool story with your Firebird, because this car is what year again?
It's 71.
71. And if you've been around the Saskatoon sort of car show circuit, you've probably seen it, and it's sort of like shiny on the bottom and not so shiny on the top.
Yeah,
it's got a neat story.
That poor car has been. I feel so bad for that car. Because, it's the life that car has lived. Like, I don't even know what I could like if you compare it to a person's life. Like,
so it's kind of like Herbie the Love Bug at the end of the movie. He's in two pieces, and then they put him back together again, right?
So when I bought the car initially, it was about 2010, and 2010, 2011, around there. And I bought the car, and I bought it out of BC, out of Kelowna. Me and some friends drove all night to go get this stupid car.
Is it just because it's the only one you could find like it, or
I
what?
always wanted that generation of Firebird. Yeah. And this one was supposed to be running and driving and in really good condition. It's supposed to be a solid car. It was from the United States. It was brought up.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to be this really solid car. But it had a T-top roof on it, which is not stock for that car. Somebody had to put it in. But it was supposedly, according to the ad, it was done really well, and you'd never even know that it was not factory kind of thing. So I thought to myself...
What's the history? T-tops didn't come out till...
76 is... Pretty sure 76 is the first year, and but that time it was an aftermarket thing installed by the Hearst company. That's why they're called Hearst tops.
Okay.
And then in 78... I think it's 78.
Is when...
77 or 70... I can't remember. Halfway through 77 or something like that. Fisher, who made the bodies for the cars, built the cars with the option for T-tops. And some of the cars had T-tops.
But this is a 70.
This is a 71. So it's
way before any of that came out.
Pre-T-top wasn't... I don't even know if T-tops were a thought in some guy's brain at the time.
Right.
But somebody had taken the roof off of probably a late 70s, probably. I'm thinking about a 79, and put it onto this car. And the story that I got was... The car was at the body shop getting work done to it in Oregon, because this was when this happened, was all when it was down in the States.
Yeah.
And the roof of the business caved in under a heavy snow one winter while the car was there being worked on, and the roof was damaged. And insurance was paying to repair the roof, and repairing the roof was going to mean replacing it because it was that badly damaged. And the owner of the car had a parts car and was like, well, I want T-tops in my car. So the
roof's got to be replaced.
Yeah,
let's put
they're
T-tops
doing
in.
it anyway. So they did this swap. And the problem is that the car's not designed to not have a roof because of its age, because it's pre-T-top era car.
Because in reality, like, T-tops are a roof, but it's really just a bar from the top of the windshield frame to the top of the frame that kind of runs around the back window.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just a sort of a piece in the middle. It doesn't do anything else.
Yeah, because the tops themselves give the car no strength.
No.
The glass tops give it no strength. So it's relying on this little bar in the middle. But those newer ones that came with T-tops from factory, all the rest of the car is reinforced to design to not have that roof.
Basically, it's either a convertible or a T-top. The bottom is built the same. Right? Like they would have been reinforced the bottom.
Whether it was a hardtop car or a T-top car, the rest of the car was all built the same. But by the time that generation of car was being built, the whole car had been reinforced with that in mind.
Yes.
Whereas the older car was not. So they had done some stuff like they put subframe connectors in it and things to try to stiffen it up. But that car was dangerously flexible, let's call it.
Really?
Yeah. It was like if you jacked it up in the wrong spot, it would bend the T-bar because the floor wasn't strong enough. And I had the stupid thing all ready to paint it back when I painted it when I first owned it, because I didn't it was black and I didn't want it black, so I painted a different color. I had it all ready for paint and was actually jacking it up to take the wheels off to paint it, because I always take the wheels off everything when I paint it. And I bent the T-bar in it, and I had to fix it before I could paint the car.
Holy.
So I'm thrashing to fix it before I painted the car. So I ended up fixing it. But the method I used to fix it was I talked to my paint rep at the time, and he said, oh, well, the new Fords have this expandable foam they're putting in all their pillars, A-pillars and everything that makes them quieter and stronger.
Ah.
Oh, okay, let's try that. So he got me some, and I put it in. But the problem is that the type of foam that I got was porous and absorbed water.
Open cell foam.
Yeah. So it worked. I could like jack that car anywhere and it would lift the whole car off the ground pretty much.
So
like,
it was solid.
It stiffened the car right up. But when I sold the car, one of the T-tops was leaking a little bit. And the car, after I didn't own it anymore, sat outside for many, many, many years uncovered because I didn't own it for about 8 years in between. And the whole time, anytime it rained or snowed and water was on the car, it went inside and the foam soaked it up. So it actually rotted the roof from the inside out. I've never seen a roof on a Firebird ever as rotten as that one was when I got it back. It was so bad that you could grab the A-pillar, which is the one that goes around the windshield, and you could move it with your hand up and down.
Whoa.
Like, it just moved that much. The car was a death trap. So I got a parts car with it when I got it back that had a full roof. So
it's had its roof taken off again.
Yeah, it's had its roof off twice since it was brand new. So, but now it's repaired correctly.
Yeah.
And it's a full roof car now. It's not a T-top car. It's a full roof like it would have been factory.
Yeah.
And it was all done at all the factory joints. Like even with the interior out of the car, you pretty much cannot tell that the roof has ever been off the car. The guy that did it for me, I would have done it probably myself, except that I was like, you know what? I don't really have enough experience doing this. Plus, I don't have a lot of time right now. I got a guy that's amazing doing metalwork and bodywork. I got him to do it, and he did an awesome job. It only took him like 3 days. He was awesome. It was amazing. He just did super fast. And the car is 10 times the car now that it ever was before.
Yep.
Purely because it has the proper roof on it now. So
That's funny.
Yeah.
And so it's just like you sold the car, it sat, you got it back, fixed it properly. Now it's just a matter of paint job.
Yeah, because so the hood was one of the other problems with the car was it had a lot of body filler in it when I bought the car.
Okay.
And from sitting outside all those years, the body filler cracked and, came apart.
Water gets underneath, rusts, all that stuff.
So the hood was no good. So it's actually a Formula Firebird. So it's the one that has the big scoops on the, like ram air scoops on the hood.
Yeah, those nostrils kind of thing. Yeah.
So I found the right hood for the car and put it on, but it was also the wrong color. So when I primed the roof, just to protect the roof, I primed the hood the same color. So the car looks like it's purposely two-toned, but it's actually not. But the plan is to paint it, I'm hoping, over this winter. So
now there's one more car we got to talk about that you're working on. It's been in the shop here before, and I think it's your wife's car.
It's actually here now.
It's here right now.
Yeah.
So what's the story behind that, and what is it?
So that car was it's a long story, but she really wanted a Nova, and we couldn't find a Nova in her price range that wasn't a piece of garbage. So then she decided she wanted a 68 Cutlass, which is 1 year older than my Cutlass. They look very similar. So and she wanted it because Brent Butt had one in corner gas and she really liked it. So
Awesome.
Now she's got to have it. So, okay. So trying to find one. Well, they're just about as hard to find as a Nova. Well, they are harder, I think. But I found one in BC, so I drove all the way to BC with a friend to go pick this car up.
There's like a theme here, I think.
Yeah, I know. And, so I drive all the way there, go to look at this car. Well, it's not nearly as nice as the guy let on, and the pictures he took were very strategic and, wasn't super great.
Yeah.
But I'd driven all that way and through the night, and it was cheap enough, and I just thought to myself, you know what? I'll just make it work. So I paid the guy, and we loaded on the trailer and drove it home. And I had to change the motor because motor was no good. And the guy did get it running and moving under its own power. And I was taking it down the little road in front of my house. And something kept falling in my eyes, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I realized that it was rust coming from the roof, but I couldn't figure out why. And then I stuck my hand up above where the headliner was, and my fingers went right through, and I could touch the windshield glass where there shouldn't be able to touch the windshield glass. And that whole top edge of the roof where the windshield sits in was gone. There was just nothing there.
Oh my God.
The only thing, I couldn't see it because the chrome trim was still on.
The stainless rust.
Stainless looked good. But in behind there was almost nothing. There was only like 2 little spots holding the stainless trim on. If I'd have driven it on the highway, it'd have probably flown right off. So then I was like, holy crap, this car needs a roof. Plus it needed some other rust repair. And so then I was like, well, I'm just going to put a hold on this, and we're going to make some decisions.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, at the same time, another one popped up in Edmonton for sale.
No.
That was supposed to be running and driving and looked very good in the pictures. So I phoned the guy and asked him a bunch of questions about it, and it had some frame damage, which was why it was for sale, because they couldn't find anybody to fix it there. So the price was right. So I loaded up the trailer on the truck and drove to Edmonton and picked this car up. And it drove onto the trailer, and it actually ran really good and everything. But I knew it needed some frame repair, and brought it back and took it to the only frame guys I would trust with anything. And even they said, it's not that it's not fixable, but it's going to cost you so much to fix it, because practically the whole car pretty much has to come apart to fix it.
Right.
You might as well, if you can find another frame, you might as well just change the frame and be done with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I already had another frame as a backup for my Oldsmobile, so I already had the frame.
Yeah.
So it was really not that big of a deal.
Cool.
So, but it turned into it's almost a nut and bolt restoration now, because I couldn't just take the body off and then put it onto this frame that wasn't painted.
Yeah.
So now paint the frame. Well, now the frame's all painted. Well, I can't put all these old control arms and suspension pieces back on. So then it's paint those and fix those. Well, I can't put them all back in with old bushings and ball joint. Well, all new parts here and there. So now it's like every nut and bolt's every nut and bolt's been out of the frame.
Yeah.
And all the suspension pieces are all basically new.
And then the wiring and the brake lines.
Well, that's what I mean, right? It just snowballed. And so now it's this... the body is now back on the frame. It didn't need any floor work. Like all the floor pans were very nice in the car. It needs a little bit of all the main body work is now done, except for the body of the car, the roof, the quarter panels.
Yep.
That's basically all that's left. The trunk and the fenders and the doors and the hood is actually just about done now, but everything else is basically done. But it's like it runs now. The motor's been out. I resealed it. I painted. It's all that part's all done. But yeah, it's just kind of been stalled because the shop's been so busy that I haven't had any time to work on it. So.
Not a bad problem to have.
Not a terrible problem to have, but definitely a pain because now I'm tripping over the stupid thing because it's here. But yeah.
That's hilarious. There's one more car you've told me about before that, although it's probably the least impressive car in your family's history, it is for other reasons. And it's that it's a car your mom had.
Yeah. Well, after my parents got divorced, she didn't have a car. My dad got the car in the divorce. So she needed a car. So my uncle actually got her I was about a 67 Buick Skylark.
Oh, okay.
I think it was an inline six car. It was nothing but a nightmare, that thing. She had so much trouble with it. And it was like 8 colors, like, because it had a different fender, different hood, and the body had 3 different colors on it.
It was already pretty old, too.
And it was an old car, but it was all she had money. She only had like $500, and that's what she paid for the car. And she worked at the Chevy dealership at the time. So she drove this thing to work, and after about 2 weeks of driving it to work, the guys in the body shop came up to her and they said, you can't drive that to here anymore. Looking like you can't drive that thing. It looks terrible. You work at a dealership and that's all we can afford to pay you is you drive that piece of crap. And she was like, well, that's all I have. She says, well, you have to leave it here for the weekend. So she did. And she took one of their loaner cars home for the weekend or whatever. Well, they had paint left over from something they had painted, and they painted it for her. They just sanded it quick and painted it. It was not even shiny. It was just a flat color.
Yeah.
They masked it off quick and painted it. They painted it the brightest yellow color I'd ever seen in my life. And then just for giggles, they had the stencil. They stenciled Z28 down the side like a 1980 Camaro.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so it had the 2 black stripes down the bottom of the side and Z28 on the back of it. And she got a kick out of that anyway. But she drove that for a little while longer, but mechanically it was just rough.
Coming apart.
Always coming apart. It wouldn't start, or it would quit, or the alternator didn't work, or we'd be driving somewhere and the headlights would turn off or get too dim, she couldn't see.
Wow, at that point, it's an old car at that point.
It is very old at that time, even then. So finally she's like, got to do something. So I guess she'd been saving money as much as she could. So working at the dealership, she got a bit of a deal. So it was 1990. And she bought a brand spanking new Chevy Sprint. And
even the words coming out of your mouth is kind of funny.
I know. It's like $8,000 brand new.
2-door?
4-door.
4-door hatch.
Hatchback, 5-speed standard.
Three cylinder or the 4?
3.
The 3.
Yeah, whatever it was, 1.2 liters or 1 liter or something. It was
I think they were a 1 liter 3 cylinder.
Little tiny.
I think
little
the
engine.
4 cylinder was a 1.2. Or whatever.
Little tiny little engine anyway.
Sewing machine.
But she loved that car because it only cost about $25 to fill it with premium fuel at the time. I think the gas price was about $59.9 at the time, 60 cents a liter. It was about $25 to fill it. And she could go, like, if all she did was go back and forth to work, she'd go for like 3 weeks on that. And it would still have fuel. We would go all over Vancouver Island with it, and it would burn pennies. Like, it was just crazy. No, it didn't have a lot of power. It had 0 options. It didn't even have a stereo radio in it when she got it.
It was a radio delete car.
A radio delete car. She actually, the dealership put one in for her, an aftermarket one for her.
So, no air conditioning.
No air.
No, like, manual windows.
Yeah.
Manual locks.
Yeah, no
manual
cruise
seats,
control.
No cruise.
No intermittent wipers. Nothing. Like, as plain Jane as you could
Probably
much get a car.
rear defrost.
Yeah. No, it did have rear defrost.
Oh, lucky.
But a lot of those cars came two-toned. So they came with a little, it was deckled down below the belt molding on the doors.
Yep.
And it was usually gray. If the car was red or blue or yellow, whatever color,
Yeah.
it was like gray. And it usually said Sprint.
Sure.
But it kind of cut out. But because she had got it, it never had that installed. It was deleted on that. So they gave her the option to have it done, and they did it for free. So, and she could have whatever she wanted on the side.
Okay.
So she got Hot Shot put in there, and at the top of the letters was like a little flame.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah, and it was funny, but she loved that car. I remember getting frozen out of it in the winter because it would rain, and then we'd get like a 0 night, and then we couldn't get in it. I'd have to go in through the hatch because none of the doors would open because they'd freeze shut. But it was a good car, and she drove that car from 1990 to 2005.
Whoa.
Yeah, and she rebuilt the motor twice in it.
Oh my gosh.
Because she did the math and figured out that
cheaper
compared to a car payment.
Yep.
It was still cheaper to just rebuild it and
that
keep
little
driving
engine.
it. So, and then when she was done with it, she gave it to my aunt. And my aunt drove it off and on for a couple of years too.
Oh my God.
And then after that, my uncle got it and he drove it for a little bit before it finally was so rusty that it had to go away.
A friend of mine had one of those in high school. Yeah, the 4-door hatch.
Yeah.
I think it was the Pontiac Firefly, like the
Yeah,
Pontiac
the
version of
version of
that.
it, yeah.
Still just as basic. It was kind of a little electric. It was actually like a cool color, like kind of an electric blue color. And like I'd ask for a ride home because they kind of lived just a couple blocks from us from high school. And like I was already a big kid then in high school, and she'd be driving it. There'd be like 5 or 6 people in this car.
Yeah.
And behind St. Joe's High School that I went to, there were these big speed bumps. Hey.
Yeah.
And she'd go flying down. We'd all be piling it, flying, and like there'd be sparks coming out of the back of this thing. The muffler would hit the ground.
Yeah.
It's funny. Yeah. It's funny how like sometimes the funniest little vehicles are the ones that stick out in your mind the most. They leave the biggest, the smallest, goofiest little car leaves the biggest impression.
Well, the stupidest part probably about that whole thing is the car that I got my first speeding ticket in was that car. Yeah.
You'd be hard pressed to break the speed limit in that car.
I'd had a stunting ticket before that, but the speeding, I got in BC at the time when I was just out of high school, shortly before I moved. Photo radar was a big thing. They had these vans, they'd park on the side of the road just in random places, and you'd pass it, and if you're speeding, you'd get a picture taken and you get a ticket. And I got the stupidest part is when I was going the other way, I saw the van there and totally forgot about it coming back, and I was doing like 8 kilometers an hour over the speed limit or something like that and got a speeding ticket. But that was my first speeding ticket was in that car. Stupid 3-cylinder Sprint. Like and by that time I'd already had a Trans Am and all this other stuff, but I got a speeding ticket in that car.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. It's so funny.
And it's a goofy little car,
Yeah,
they were funny things.
They were very, very cheaply made. They were designed to get you back and forth to work and nothing else. Yeah. And, they were good for that. But my mom took that thing on trips and all over the place. And she went everywhere in it because it was her only car. But it lasted a long time. She definitely got her money out of it. Like, for what she paid, she definitely got her money out of it. The car she bought afterwards didn't last as long.
Really?
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. And when you own it from brand new, she took very good care of it.
Sure. Yeah, and she worked at the
Maintained it.
dealership,
Oh,
so
yeah, like
no
she
problems.
did oil changes and always ran premium fuel in it, and she got 150,000 out of the first engine. And then the second engine, she only got about 60 the second time. And then the third time, I think it only got
But she was having it
40,
rebuilt.
But and actually, if you talk to any Chevy tech, those engines were not rebuildable.
Oh, really?
They were the way they were made. They were already machined so thin. Everything was like a borderline maximum right from the get go.
Yep.
So and they were aluminum. They were kind of their own, kind of a weird engine, but they were basically non-rebuildable engines. And she had it rebuilt twice. So
They were a Chevy, but they weren't really a Chevy.
it said when you opened the door, there was a plaque inside the door jamb that said "Made by Suzuki Motor Company for General Motors."
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a deal with them. 'Cause Suzuki had a version of it too, and I just can't.
It's Swift.
Swift. That's
Yeah.
it. Swift. Yeah. So I think they were Japanese little cars, I guess.
Yeah,
but-
they basically like Suzuki made the Tracker as well
Yep.
because Suzuki Sidekick was the Suzuki version of that, and they were virtually identical.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, that was they did, and GM was probably smart to do it because to tool a factory to build those little cheap little cars, they never made any real money.
No.
So
that's
they were
right.
all brought over on a boat made in
Japan. I think it was
and-
Japan.
Yeah,
I think
made in
Suzuki's
Japan, and
Japanese, yeah.
you know what, they were cheaply made cars, and they lasted as long as they probably should have lasted.
You know what, Darren? We're going to have to leave it right there for this moment, but we're going to continue this podcast next week. Next week, we're calling it Go Out and Buy an Old Car, because Darren and I are going to talk about exactly how much fun it is to drive an old car these days. Thanks for joining me today and listening to Bald Tires, because when you make great memories, you make bald tires.